In this video I will start making a plugin for multiplayer in the game Mindustry. And won't finish it. Yet. You see, every game now has this kind of a ranked system matchup, where people of the same level get to fight with someone who is about the same level as you. So let's create the same thing for Mindustry. But why Mindustry? First, I've been speedrunning it for quite a while now, like this game, and wanted to fill this gap. Second, this is an open source game, mostly written in Java, which I have a good knowledge of. So I had an idea, which I'll explain in this video series, which involves automatically connecting players to separate instances of the servers. And here is an example. When a player goes to a specific place on the map, the game automatically reconnects him to the other server. For me, this was the most difficult part to understand how this can actually happen. As you can see, now PvP in the game usually involves teams, but I want to make it more for 1v1. I started with setting up a game server in the DigitalOcean. I created a new droplet, but I didn't know what operating system to choose. So I decided to Google first on how to set up a game server for Mindustry and found this page. The process is really simple. You download a specific version of Java, download the latest release of server jar, then start it and type a command to start hosting. I went ahead and did all this stuff one by one. Since there were no requirements for Linux distributive, I chose the one I am the most familiar with, Ubuntu. While my droplet was being created, I googled for the latest Java 8 release of the Adopt JDK project. Since I was doing it for the first time, this took quite a long time to install everything on the server, and I already started to think, this will take forever. Okay, another try to properly set up SSH case and an attempt to properly install Java, which would make my life later a little bit easier. But this was not successful, so I decided to get away with Java only in the current session for now. We got Java, yay! Let's upload the server jar file now. It took me some time to remember a proper command to transfer the file. Then, to remember what flags I should use out of this huge amount of choices I had, but eventually I got it. After that I decided it was time to try to start the server and verify that it actually works. It started and was waiting for another command to actually start hosting. And by that time I knew there is something wrong. But what? I killed the fly and moved on. Let's see what maps we have to host. The list describes all default maps, so I typed host fork and that's it. Server told me it was being hosted on the default Mindustry port. Pretty easy, right? Now this is finally the time to connect to my new server for the very first time and make sure that it works as expected. Insert the address with correct port. And voila, I am successfully connected. This was my very first milestone that I wanted to achieve, dedicated server hosting. But what about the plugins for the server? I asked Google and found two great resources. This example plugin repo by the game developer himself and another repo of an already implemented bunch of commands for the server where it said how to install server plugins. Good knowledge to have right in time. But before we continue, I wanted to make my Mindustry server more stable and create a system service, so that it could be controlled from systemctl utility. This tutorial gave me a good idea on how to make it. so I started with copy-paste and later adjusted the running command. After an unnecessary long time it finally worked, and I could run the server in the background. Next thing was to automate hosting the server. Remember, we need to type host after we run the server. So I looked into sources to find the hidden details of that and put my current config into the start file. Of course, it did not work right away, but on literally the second try I got how it works. You basically provide command as arguments and they will be applied when you start the server. Now it was time to inject an example plugin. First I cloned the original repo, launched my favorite IDE and opened the project. It took some time to build it properly, but the process is very straightforward. After uploading it to the server, I launched and checked that server still works. But there were no signs of plugin being injected. And this strange string, which looks like this is some kind of a base64 encoding. I tried to decode it and got, well, nothing useful. So I decided to switch my attention to the more intriguing part of the challenge – ELO rating. On Wikipedia there are some formulas down on the page which just look like this is what I needed. I switched into IDE and started coding. We have this block in the plugin constructor that creates a callback for an event. Let's see what other events we have here. There are a lot of them. Let's choose this one, player connect, and do some simple stuff with it. For example, send a sample message into chat. Clean up the rest of the code, rebuild, reupload and reconnect to the server. Yay, I got this message, which is actually what I wanted. And it seems like the string back then was the UID of the player. After I looked for the proper way of logging in Mindustry. And found this nice way that outputs exactly like the rest of the messages. Next step was to set up a database to store players and their ratings. I decided to use MongoDB just because I always wanted to try this out. But wait, here's the catch. Off my microphone. Okay, back to work. Finding a good example of MongoDB in Java was easy. So let's install MongoDB into the same machine as my server is running right now. The installation process is quite easy, just copy-paste all the commands from the guide and that's it. When I got it running, next thing I did was to start implementing the logic of the plugin. Using MongoDB looked very easy, so I followed the guide on connecting the library to the project and copied a couple of lines. Switching again to ELO rating. I got it that information on the wiki page was not enough for me. and decided to find this simple tutorial on how rating is actually being calculated. The process involves some plain maths which didn't look like something very complicated. So the next thing I tried was to implement those formulas, and in the end I switched back to connecting a database inside my project. This was the very first time I used MongoDB in Java, so I had to Google quite a lot on how to create a connection, create a database, insert values and update them. The general idea for now is to create a player record on the first connect and update this record on any later reconnections. In the game loop I wanted to wait until I had 2 players online and make a record on match history collection so that the players could see their results from the past. I also found a nicer way to log arguments, which was already provided inside MyIndustry. Moment of truth. Okay, error, class cast exception. I can fix this now. Okay, and another one. Okay, fix it again. Yay, finally no errors. Let's try to switch into PvP mode now. Error again? Yay, waiting for players. I need 2 players, but have only 1 PC. I got an idea. My phone. The developer is very strict in terms of cross-platform support for MyIndustry, and it is available on all devices with cross-platform multiplayer. So I connected my phone and saw exactly what my code intended to do. Let's try to fight. Another error. Okay, it happens, we learn from them. I also wanted to adjust settings in such a way that I could finish the game faster for beta testing. After digging through the source code of the game, I found a bunch of rules that could be used in order to configure the gameplay process. Fire rates, damage rates, health multipliers and so on. So I tried the first approach and it didn't really work. Then I searched for some more time. And tried again. No, still too slow. But on the third time it was finally there. I can now win in a couple of shots. It was getting late and I decided to spend some time on testing a couple server-side commands I implemented. Here they are, in the list. Try to guess what happens when I enter this command. Lame error, strange error, crazy error, or will nuclear reactor go boom? Ready? The result is list rankings, command not found. Did you mean? List rankings. But of course the result was the same for the second command. And I also found out at the end that it didn't support commands with capital letters, which was quite surprising. After this short fix, let's verify that my elo calculator actually works. For the same values, this method should produce about the same values, like in a usual ranked game, but it didn't. Coming back to instruction, and here is the fix. Let's try it again. Seems like it works. That was the end of my first week of development. Please follow the links in the description to try it by yourself in its current state, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.